Here we're at Churubusco, and right here is where they fought the Battle of Churubusco. And you can still see the holes there are from the battle. And here's where, when the Americans were here in what we call the Mexican-American War, the Mexicans had been beaten at Cerro Gordo, and they came here. This was an ex-convent, and this is just outside of Mexico City. And because it was the most defendable place, it was a convent, and so the Mexicans made a stand here, and when they ran out of ammunition, the Americans took over. The curious thing about this battle is that the St. Patrick's Battalion were a bunch of Irish and actually just Catholics from Ireland, and that had fled Ireland because of the famine there. And but there was also other nationalities as well, but they were mostly Irish, and so it was the Irish Brigade or St. Patrick's Brigade. And they had a bunch of them had been part of the U.S. Army, and the U.S. Army were mostly Protestants, and so they kind of were against the Catholics. The Protestants were hard on them, and so a lot of the Irish left. And because when they, at the time that they left, they were here in Mexico, and because Mexico at the time was mostly Catholic, then they joined forces with a lot of them with the Catholics or the Mexican Army. And so here at this battle, the St. Patrick's Battalion were really an important part of the defense. But when the Mexicans ran out of ammunition, they surrendered, obviously. But there was still a lot of losses, especially for the Americans. And so when the St. Patrick's Battalion was captured, the Americans, they hung some of the leaders that had been deserters, so to speak, and then also the ones that they didn't hang, they branded as deserters, so a big D on their cheek. And this is depicted in the movie One Man's Hero with Tom Berenger, and the movie actually follows pretty closely to historical facts, obviously with some additional Hollywood stuff. But they were hung not too far from here in a place where they could see Chapultepec. And when Chapultepec fell to the American Army and they raised the U.S. flag, then they hung several of the so-called deserters. And I think that the film, does a pretty good job of portraying what the St. Patrick's, the people that were sympathetic to them, what their view was, whether it's right or wrong, or, right now it's just part of history, so we just accept it, right? So this convent, through time, is now turned into a museum, and it's the Museum of Insurgency. And so inside it has information of what the Mexicans call the American incursion, and also the French, when the French came down here, and most of the Americans would know that as Cinco de Mayo, even though they confuse it still with what it actually is. And a couple of other things, like when the Americans came in 1914 as a punitive expedition after Pancho Villa went to New Mexico and raided a town in New Mexico. So anyways, it's got a lot of history here, and as you can see, the marks on this building still has battle wounds, so to speak.